Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Choosing the Right SharePoint Structure, How Team Sites and Communication Sites Differ. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Kingsley, and I'll be producing and moderating. And I'm super excited to have Nina Adams, our Microsoft 365 consultant, joining us on the session today. So before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. First of all, you'll notice on the right hand, I believe it's the right hand of your screen, you'll see a Q&A panel. If you have any questions, feel free to post questions throughout the session there. I'll try and answer them offline and or I'll interject them at the end of the session. So once our 30 minutes of prepared content is done, we'll open it up for Q&A and I'll try and interject them there as well. But feel free to post questions throughout the session. So let's get started. Let's move to the next slide there, Nina. Awesome. So I'm going to introduce Nina, and she's going to take over the quick takes for today. So Nina, you want to take that over?
Thanks, Stephanie, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. Just high level, some quick takes that we're going to be looking at today. And one of the first things is the differences in how we typically work in an organization. And then we're going to look at how exactly that relates to Microsoft SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. And then we're going to look at some key considerations when deciding on a team site versus a communication site and when it's the most appropriate to use either. So just a high level of the agenda today. So the purpose of the session, as I said, is just the key differences between a team site and communication site, and then how to decide really what is the most appropriate structure for you based on your organizational requirements. I'm going to do a little bit of a demo just to show you what the two different sites look like, and then at the end of the session, we'll open it up for Q&A. Stephanie, I'm just going to hand over to you for a second here.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. Awesome. So just like to take 1 minute about MyTech. We've had people come to these sessions before and they think that we're maybe a training company. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what our bread and butter is and what we do before we dig into the session. So we at MyTech are business and technology consultants, and we really serve the small to medium-sized businesses within our two geographies, which is around the Denver metro area and the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Ultimately, we help you implement a proven IT strategy that's aligned with your business goals and where you are going as a business. And our goal is to remove IT challenges. As small business owners, we all have plenty of things on our plate to worry about and to strategize about, and we just don't want IT to be one of them. We want to remove those challenges from you. So ultimately, you can focus on serving your customers better and be more adaptable to the other business challenges that you are, experiencing on a daily basis. So our brand promise is that our clients achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So if this is something you're interested in talking about, raise your hand or send us an email or fill out a contact form on our website at mytech.com. But that's not why you're here today. So I will toss it back over to Nina, and she's going to get into the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Because now the slide won't move. There we go. So before we actually dig into the demo and kind of looking at what a team site and a communication site look like in SharePoint, I wanted to just take a step back for a second and think about the differences in how we typically work in an organization. So the first category is working alone, just me, myself, and I. And so there's many instances when that is the case, when you're not really collaborating in a team, you're not working with others. It's just that a specific thing has been assigned to you to do. Now that could be a report, a spreadsheet, perhaps you're working on a presentation. And that is very often how we do work. It's often solo. So the next category is that other times I collaborate within a team. So it could be a team, it could be a group, it could be a department, it could even be a project team. So the communication here looks a little bit different. In a team, the communication is often two-way and it's more private or internal to that particular team. So what do teams often do? So for example, they run meetings. In the meetings, there are agendas, there are minutes, we keep track of that. Those are things that are created and distributed amongst the other members of my team. We often have tasks. So maybe we're working on a project and we have different tasks assigned to different people. Obviously, many times with a deadline attached, as we well know. Let's look at document collaboration and what that looks like within a team. So very oftentimes we're all working on a document together. So perhaps let's think of, for example, a policy document. Maybe it's a marketing team working on a newsletter, and different people within the team are probably working on different sections of that document. So maybe we're giving comments, maybe we're going through some kind of an approval process. So very oftentimes the document in this phase of its life cycle is in a draft format. So in order for our team to be able to do all of these things, to collaborate, to communicate, and to do tasks together, everybody within that team does need read-write access. So that's an important distinction and one to keep in mind as we look at the next category. In other circumstances, we would like to work or communicate with a larger audience. So this could be across different departments, perhaps, or it could be for the whole company and everyone in the company. Generally, the communication looks a little bit different to that in a team because it's more one way, it's more for public consumption. So if we look at the document management example in the previous category, here in this category, the document has by now reached its final stage. So perhaps the newsletter example we were talking about, that newsletter has been published in a PDF format, or perhaps or perhaps it's a template, or perhaps there's other information for public consumption, like news articles, events that are coming up, etc. So here we need a little bit more permission flexibility. And what do I mean by that? So where in the team, everybody had read-write access. Maybe for most members of the team, or for most members in the organization that we're publishing this to, we would like them to have read-only access instead. In this instance, maybe I have one or two designated people that will help me edit or keep that content up to date. So I would maybe designate them to have edit access. So a little bit more flexibility than what we would typically have in a team or a group or a department environment. So let's see, looking at those different categories, how we would go about selecting the appropriate platform. So when I'm working on my own and the documents are private to me, I would then work in OneDrive. And a good way to remember this, a client said to me the other day, is one person, OneDrive. So that's an easy way to remember that. If we're working in a team or a department or a group together, then we would typically work in Microsoft Teams or a team site in Microsoft SharePoint. So I just want to stop there for a second and just explain how these two platforms work hand in hand. If I create a team, group, or department in Microsoft Teams, and thanks again for having all this similar vocabulary there, what happens is it creates a related team site in SharePoint with a whole lot of attached assets. So things like a calendar, planner, a document library, OneNote, etc. I could also go to SharePoint and create a team site from there, because as we know with Microsoft, there's always more than one way to do it. So we could do a team site from Microsoft SharePoint, but one thing to note there is that I would then have to go and connect that to Microsoft Teams after the fact. But for a team, group, department, a team site would be the most appropriate. Now, if we're looking at a bit more flexibility and we want to be able to publish to a wider audience, as we looked at in the previous slide, then a communication site would be the most appropriate for that. One really easy way to think about this, and this is just a great way for me to remember it or explain it, is if we think of a cake shop, for example, the team side would be the back of the cake shop where we're doing the baking and the decorating and preparing of the cakes. The communication side would be the display case where we're displaying that for our customers to see and consume. And if anybody's hungry after this, I don't blame you. right, so I'm going to stop the PowerPoint right there just for a second because I want to show you in the demo environment just what that looks like. So I've set up a little bit of a demo environment. It's a demo clinic that we're working with here. And before we dig into the different sites, I want to show you how it looks in our navigation. So navigation is a personal preference. Every company does it a little differently. The way I like to do it is to have two sections in the navigation, one for the public communication piece or communication site, and the other for the team site. And you'll see the same thing here with HR. So here's all the public facing documentation, the payment portal, benefits, HR policies and procedures, etc. And then on the right hand side here, I have the team site where the team can access their documents and other assets there. So I know that generally people will ask that very next question would be, well, what if somebody doesn't actually have access to the marketing team or they don't belong to the marketing team? What will happen if they click over here? And that's generally when we get to the really meany message access denied. So as a public service announcement, I just want to mention that in our webinar next month, we're going to dig in a lot more into navigation and how to hide certain navigational elements from people who shouldn't be seeing it. We're also going to be looking at design, logo placement, and all kinds of other fun things. So just to demonstrate it here, because I have admin rights, I can see both of these, the marketing communication site and the team site. And I'm just going to quickly go over here. I've logged into a different web page here as Peter Parker. Peter Parker doesn't actually have access to the marketing team site because he's not a marketing team member. So if I hover over here, you can see that he can't even see the team site. So hopefully we don't get into a situation where he's clicking on something and getting the access denied message. So I'm just going to go back in here. So that's how I generally set this up. Again, everybody, has a different way of doing things. That's just how I like to do it to keep everything together. And before we actually look at the clinic's marketing team site, I just want to quickly pass by Microsoft Teams and show you what I have set up here. So the marketing team has a team in Teams. Thank you again for that. Where we can communicate, collaborate, do meetings here. We also have access to all of the files that the team's working on. The wiki, as I mentioned earlier, we would be running meetings, there'd be agendas, meeting notes, etc. So we keep track of all of that here. And we also have a planner attached. So lots of different tasks that we're working on, and we have some Q3 and Q4 initiatives where we can assign certain things to certain team members. So I often get the question, like, is it the right way to access all of this information from within Microsoft Teams? Or should I be accessing this via SharePoint? And again, this is just a matter of personal preference, although most of the clients that we work with generally tend to use Microsoft Teams as their hub and then connect everything in there from here. As you can see, you can add additional tabs. So you could connect other apps, other document libraries, whatever you need to do, so that it really does create kind of a one-stop shop kind of area. All right, so, and I can show you here from files, if we go to open in SharePoint, then we'll see what the marketing team actually looks like in SharePoint. So at this stage, as of the day that we're making the video, typically a marketing team site will have navigation on the left-hand side. I'm saying as of today because with Microsoft, this might change in future iterations where the navigation will live in a different place, but I'm just kind of mentioning it for today. Another thing to note with team sites, if you just look at the general look and feel, it's not always that pretty. A little bit of the Cinderella situation here, just because it really is a working environment, and mostly my team doesn't have a lot of time to add in lots of pictures and make it look pretty. Having said that, if that's something that you'd like to do and you'd like to, enhance the design in some way, then yeah, absolutely no problem with that. But generally, you can see a team site looks more like a working environment. I have a business listing here. I can access the planner from here as well. And I also can access our internal document library. So I'm just going to go to the document library real quick. The important thing that I want to show you here with the document library is the type of documents that usually live within a team site. So our meeting agendas, for example, and because this is internal to the marketing team, client lists, for example, lead generation tracking forms, financials, surveys, metrics, perhaps some meeting recordings. Now, most of these documents will remain an internal document. It's not something that I want to publish to anybody outside of my team. But I do want to highlight two documents here. My team has been working on a quarterly newsletter, and this newsletter, once it's finalized and they're done collaborating on it and everybody's done their bit, will then be published to the company as a whole. So this is sometimes where we find with clients things get a little bit confusing. Like, well, where does it live? How do I keep track of it? Where does it go? So there's different ways to address this issue. Power Automate, if you are familiar with that, might be one way to do it, where you could automate the workflow of an approval process, where once it's been approved, it will automatically be moved to the relevant site that it needs to live in. But if you're not familiar with Power Automate, one other option here is to tag the document. So we're not going to really look into documents and metadata today. I just wanted to mention that we do have other webinars on this topic. So if you want to find out more, please go ahead and look at our YouTube channel. There are some options there. So I'm just going to quickly go into this document and just demonstrate here. So I've created a couple of tags for the document status, so it either remains an internal document, or perhaps it's been submitted for review, or it's been reviewed, or it's been approved. And in this case, this document was approved and moved to production. So I made a little comment over here. So the final version was published on the marketing communication site on that date. And again, there's a lot of different ways that you could tackle this issue on how the document moves through its life cycle, but this might be a relatively easy or simple way to kind of keep track of where they live. You'll notice that the Q3 newsletter over here was approved, but we haven't yet published it to the communications site. So just a little bit of a note there to show you kind of what that looks like. And now I'm going to go over to the marketing communication site. And right off the bat, you probably notice that there's quite a big difference in how they look. So the marketing teams, the marketing communication site, is, because it's more public facing, will generally have a little bit of a fancier look about it. It has this really fancy hero web part at the top here. And one thing to note is that you don't have to be a designer or an artist or a graphic designer to do this. I certainly am not. And this I created in just a couple minutes. And this is because Microsoft has all kinds of out-of-the-box functionality for templates and things that you can apply. And again, that's something that we'll dig into a little bit more in our webinar next month. So a little bit fancier. As is the case with public-facing websites out there, we want to make it a little bit more interesting. We want to draw our audience in. We want to keep them interested. So a few well-placed logos or pictures can really make all the difference. Again, I want to focus on the type of information and the type of content that lives here. You can see we have a survey here that we would like people to fill in. So we have a training survey that we created with forms. If I scroll down here a little bit, there's different high-level things about our leadership, our vision, our culture. We have some upcoming events that are important to take note of, some news. And again, as you can see, very much one-way consumption for the audience. The documents that live here are typically final versions of their documents. So brand guidelines, logos and images that employees are allowed to use, PowerPoint templates, and there's my newsletter in its PDF format. So I hope that that kind of illustrates just the different types of content that lives here. And although today's session is not really meant to go too deep into permissions, I just want to show you at a really high level what that looks like for my site. If you click on this gear icon at the top here, and again, this is a matter of having permissions to do so. If you don't have admin permissions on this site or owner permissions, you wouldn't be able to get in here. So just one thing to note. So in terms of site permissions, you'll see I have 3 different groups here. Site owners who have full control, site members with limited control, and site visitors with no control. So what I've decided is I have 2 site owners here, myself and Nathan Austin. I would generally recommend that you do have a backup site owner just in case the person's not available or perhaps they're out of town and somebody else needs to make changes to the site, that you always have somebody as a backup. Now, full control means exactly that. You have control over everything in the site, all the content, all the permissions. You could delete it. Hopefully not, but you could delete it if you so chose, if you choose to do that. If I hover here over the eye, you can see an explanation here. Full control of site content, theme, permission settings, site settings, and hub associations. All right, so full control over everything. Site members have limited control, and if you hover there, it means that they can edit and view site content. So let's think about that in the context of our marketing site. So I have designated a person, or I need to designate a person that can help me keep the content of the site up to date. As soon as those events have expired, we want to add new events. Once the newsletters are no longer valid, we would like to change that out. So we do have to try to make sure that the content is kept up to date, but the person doing that would need edit access. So here I have designated Stephanie as that person, and she helps me to manage the content on the site. So site visitors have no control. It means that they only have read access here. And I've designated that everybody within the company is able to come to the site, view the contents, read the contents, but are not able to edit or change anything. So I hope that that makes sense. You can go to deeper levels from at this stage, we're setting the permissions at the site level. You could go deeper down and do permissions on the library level. That's a little bit out of the scope of today's conversation. But if that is something that you'd like to do, my recommendation there would be to group all kinds of documents of the same type of permission in the same library. But for the most part, we try to keep it pretty high level with permissions.
Hey, Nina, on the permissioning part of that, can you, for those who are not familiar with Teams and how the permissioning, the high level permissioning around a team site and a Teams team, can you explain the difference? And like, that's something we would not be able to do within a team site, right? So that's one of the major differences between the two.
Absolutely. So again, as I mentioned in the when we were going over the slides, that everybody within that team has read-write access. So if you want to go beyond the scope of read-write access and be more granular with your permissions, then definitely a communication site would be the way to go. So we can set it up for certain people, have certain permissions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Just really quick, and again, we're not going to go into too much detail with that. I'm going to go here to the SharePoint. I just want to show you when you create the sites. If you click on the Create Site button there, you have the option here of creating the team site, and it's everything that we've just discussed. Private space to collaborate with your team, stay up to date with projects, that everybody's co-authoring the content, and all site owners and members publish site content. So just what you mentioned there, Stephanie. So versus the communication site, where it's more engaging and informing your viewers. So it could be subject specific type things, and we're generally looking at a broader audience there. So generally we would have fewer content authors, but many site visitors. So I just wanted to show you there where to create that. Okay, and again, at the next session, we'll be digging into this a little bit more as well. All right, I'm just going to pop back in here. So I just want to summarize some of those key considerations, and I hope that that will be helpful when you're thinking about what to select, whether a team site's more appropriate or whether communication site's more appropriate. So just to summarize, team site is more two-way communication and it's more private or internal to the team. So it's appropriate for department, group, or a team. Important that every member of the team has read-write access. So if that's not something you want, then a team site might not be appropriate for you. And this is ideal for internal collaboration on tasks and documents. Whereas with the communication site, generally speaking, the communication is more one way, it's more public for a broader audience. So it's appropriate for, let's say we want to do something but across different departments or organization wide. So if you are looking for a little bit more permission flexibility, depending on roles, like you want to designate read only versus editing roles, then a communication site would be more appropriate. And definitely more ideal for public information like final policies, newsletters, events, news, etc. All right, I think I'm going to stop talking there for a second, Stephanie, and hand it over to you for a bit.
Thanks. Yeah, and we'll open it up for Q&A here in a minute, but just to round out the session here, thank you for joining us. Definitely consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. We will be posting this video along with all of our other videos on YouTube. So subscribe so that you can, and click the little alarm icon so you can get a notification when we post new content. Feel free to share these recordings or these events with others that may find this helpful. This is free content and we're really out there just to create awareness and education. So feel free to share. And join us for future events. As Nina had mentioned, next month we're digging into more of the design and best practices for our communication site. So register for that and others. And then also we have power user group sessions every other month that really dig into more the back-end controls and admin panel of Microsoft 365. And I think we've talked about maybe even at a power user level, digging in deeper to communication site permissions in the future. So make sure to subscribe for our event emails so that you'll keep up to date on those as well. So thanks everybody for joining. I know there's some Q&A coming in right now, so we're going to get to that, and then feel free to continue posting questions and we'll get through all of them as fast as we can. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Nina. We do have a couple questions that have come in. So let's see, the first one here was wanting to know that when you create a team site from the SharePoint side, does it create a team in Teams?
Very excellent question. And I actually have a little demo here to just show you. So the short answer is no. If you create it from the SharePoint site, as I showed here, create site and team site, it doesn't automatically connect to Microsoft Teams. And I actually have an example here. So Stephanie and I are actually working on an internal project, and we've done a little bit of a mock-up here. And I created a team in SharePoint, but I haven't yet connected it to Microsoft Teams. So if you look at the bottom left corner here, it says add real-time chat, add Microsoft Teams. So you generally do that then after the fact. Whereas if you're doing it from Microsoft Teams, it'll automatically do all of that connection for you. So thank you. That's a great question.
Awesome, thanks. The next question is it true that you cannot convert a team site into a communication site after creation? I ran into this and everything from Microsoft said not possible.
I haven't actually tried it myself, but I have heard that as well, that it isn't possible to convert one to the other. So yeah, haven't tested a theory yet, but I have read the same thing as well.
Right, but you are, if I'm not mistaken, and I think you said this earlier, you are able to take a communication site and link it, or you're able to connect them, a communication site, or is it only a team site that can be connected to a Teams?
No, the team site.
Okay,
yeah.
That's what it was. Gotcha.
Yeah. But you know, as we were talking, just to that question as well, as creating this as the hub, you can connect other sites to your Teams hub here. So let's say I wanted to create a really quick link to the communication site, I could absolutely add it here as well. So let's see if we have a quick link here. And it's might just be an easy way to keep everything in one place, because I know sometimes you have to go out into SharePoint, get in through that way. So see if I can link it from here real quick. Of course, it takes time to think about it. So yeah, I could totally add that as a tab up here so that we have, my team has access to everything from within Microsoft Teams. So I just wanted to illustrate that as well, just to kind of make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Yeah, and whoever posted that question too, if you have an example of why, I'd be interested to know why a team site, did you build that out first and then we're trying to make it a communication? That'd be interesting to know that as well. So feel free to post that. The next question in here is, one of the things we like about Teams is the notification of new posts. Are there ways for users to be notified when things are posted to a communication site?
That's a good question. I think you could potentially use the alert. Let's see. Let's see if we can play around with that. Let's go here. I might not be able to do it quite here, but I think there's a way. Is it just in general? Like,
yeah, like if someone was like, you know, you have your news at the top. If let's say me as a marketing person, we're going to post something new. There's this new document. Is that something that could be, I guess I would ask, is it something that could be posted to like a Teams channel or something like new content posted?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a way to set up alerts. I haven't tried it yet myself, so that's a good question and something that I can go dig into a little bit more. But I generally, as I'm posting stuff, also post it in Microsoft Teams just so that everybody knows that there's new content available. But yeah, good question. Maybe from the site side, if there's a way to do it. And if we, you know, once we get the steps for that, Stephanie, we can probably post that.
Yeah. Or
later.
Maybe even demonstrate it next month in our session next month.
Yeah.
So that's a
Giving
great
us
question.
content for next month.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, there's no other questions published right now, so feel free, anybody, to post any additional questions, but I just had one while we're waiting for that. Nina, you know, you and I have talked over the last few days even about some of just the challenges and it sounds like somebody else here maybe had a similar challenge of creating something within a team site, and what challenges we've experienced or what challenges do you foresee trying to create something that is all company facing within a team site? I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that or.
Yeah, I was actually hoping that you would just chat a little bit about the project that we're working on currently.
Yeah.
Because I think that speaks to progression that I think a lot of organizations go through. Just the frustration of, well, we set it up in one way and like a couple of years down the line, we realize, well, we actually need to make some changes there. And I think probably a lot of people listening are, have dealt with similar challenges. And so I just was hoping maybe you could just talk a little bit about just kind of the challenges you had with your team site and why we're now revamping everything and changing everything out. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak about that. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm within the marketing department. What we did is we have a lot of internal, collaboration going on, but as well as we produce external documents. And so in order, because of our structure and the team site structure, we publish this content in the marketing team site, and only the people that are part of that site had access to it. So our salespeople or our general managers or our technicians needed access to that stuff. So we ended up inviting them into our team. So now our, relatively small marketing team now has, 20 some people in it, which is fine because it's fine in the aspect that there's nothing confidential or anything that I'm worried that they're going to see in there, but it's just noisy because we've got all these people in there in a space that's supposed to be collaborative. So you know, we tried to get around that fact, but just found it to be that that's not the correct way to do things, or nor the intended way to do them. So that's where Nina is now helping us pull and really evaluate the content that's in our team site to say, what is this that needs to be available for everybody in the organization, or a larger group of people in the organization, so that we can lock our team down just to the marketing team, so we can collaborate and not create noise or chaos for anybody else. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. Is that what you were thinking, Nina?
Yeah. And also the fun thing that happens when you try to schedule a meeting in your team.
Oh gosh, yeah, I forgot about that. So that was just a sub thing that we found. You know, for instance, when you schedule a meeting and you invite the channel, I'm now inviting all 20 some people to the meeting. So I just had to get around that by you know, only inviting the marketing folks to those meetings. So again, we made it work in the best way we knew how, but I think now we know the right way, and I'm excited to we're building our communication site along with our all company communication site. There's a lot of them that we've realized this is now the split, and Nina's really helped us look at that differently, to be able to see, you know, how those should be split. So
yeah, and we're mentioning all of this because we have a really good idea of the pain that you feel. We've been through the same iterations, the same progression. So yeah, we get it.
all right, while we were chatting, a couple more questions came in, Nina. So the next one says, does the channel chat show anywhere on the Teams SharePoint site?
Not generally. As I said, we generally use this as the hub on this side, and then although the content lives on the SharePoint side, but yeah, I haven't set up anything that there's any chatter going on the SharePoint side. I don't even know how one would do that.
Yeah. And then another one came in asking, do you create team sites as top level sites or as a sub site?
So subsites are more of a kind of classic SharePoint concept. So with modern SharePoint, it's really more of a flat structure. And then that's where we kind of use the hub site to kind of connect everything. And that I could just quickly show over here. This navigation over here, I created with a hub site, and that's how all the sites are kind of connected to one another. But really with modern SharePoint, we don't do the kind of subsite anymore. It's more of a flat structure, and the hub sites and kind of how to do that again will be in next month's webinar.
Awesome. All right, well, I don't see any other questions coming in, but as always, feel free to reach out if anybody does have questions. So thank you, Nina, for joining us today and bringing us through that content. And thank you to everybody for joining us in the session, and we hope to see you next month.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining.